would also like to thank Ernst and Maria for organizing this webinar. I feel it's very important to keep communicating and to take advantage of these new opportunities. Our presentation, it's me and Costas. It's about the significance of international art events and how we can use them in art education. But I would like to give you a bit more context of about the CARE project. I will start with how we try to utilize these projects' results and promote these results during international art exhibitions that are happening here in Cyprus. Then Costas will talk more about, in general, the importance of art events as educational tools, and then I will come back and tell you how we try to reach out educators. So a few things about the CARE project. Some of you may know about it because we presented in previous webinars some things about the project, but some are hearing this European project for the first time. So the title is Visual Art Education in New Times, Connecting Art with Real Life Issues. The aim was to develop and deliver innovative teacher trainings that will empower teachers in visual arts education within the framework of education for sustainable development and help them address contemporary educational challenges. We focus in primary education. So the trainings were offered to pre-service and in-service teachers. Very briefly, the key issues were about contemporary art, sustainable development goals, real life issues, real life needs, and education through art. So that were key issues that we tackled. And we had 6 outputs, work packages. So we started with needs analysis to see what our teachers needed in connection with the key issues that I just mentioned. Then we developed curricula, which were ESD enhanced. We also developed resources, which were artist templates. And one of the presenters, if I'm not mistaken, will specifically talk about this. Then we went on and ran our case studies in 4 countries. So you can see the partners here. So we ran trainings in Cyprus, in Malta, in England, and in Greece. As a partner is also InSEA, who helped a lot in monitoring the quality of the project. Then we asked, the 4th phase was implementations of art units in schools. So the teachers who were trained, we bridged the theory and the praxis. We also pay a lot of emphasis on developing professional learning communities, and that was the focus of a previous webinar. And you can see it if you are interested in it through the recording. And we are now at this phase where we finished the 5th phase, and we are developing our handbook for teachers. All the outputs will be available freely online in the care.frederick.ac.cy website. And so we soon will have the books that came out from all these, and the last one will be the handbook for teachers. So just to move on, no, I will not move on, I will stop here. I will just say that we tried to use these results in, as I said at the beginning, in events that are happening now in Cyprus, but I will pass the floor to Costas, who will talk more generally about the, how the importance of international art events, and then we will come back to what we did in Cyprus. So the floor is yours, Costa.
Thank you, Victoria. I hope you're all listening or hearing me and seeing my slides. Okay. I need to sort of identify myself, because I'm not an educator in the strict sense of education. So I'm not a teacher. It's just that I come from the School of Arts, but I do educate though in visual arts. And what came out of the CARE project when we had this series of seminars with all the teachers in Cyprus. It was this real need, I think, from teachers to really grasp what contemporary art is all about. Contemporary art is very dynamic, and it's quite new, although it's been going on since the beginning of the 20th century. Real contemporary art of the 21st century, it's very new. So we thought of, this is something I had in mind for many years now, since my early teaching years at Frederick University, but the notion of travel, the notion of going to various either art museums or exhibitions internationally, it's a very valuable educational tool. And that came out very strongly during the 9 weeks of seminars that we had during CARE. The pandemic has not helped the last 2 years to achieve this goal. I mean, traveling has been demonized, unfortunately, but hopefully it's going to come back. But because of the new technologies, because of the internet, I think everybody can have access to any grand art institution around the world. So yes, we strongly believe that we can learn through art, learning through art from significant art institutions around the world. And starting with that, what I'm trying to do with you this morning in the very few minutes that I have allocated for my presentation is that trying to share the experience of me as an artist and educator with the rest of you. Visits to museums, they're very, very essential, very, very important. And as I said to you, the pandemic has not helped because it has made us stop traveling, but the internet can help in that. And I'm just going to lay out some facts and suggestions for all of you, which museums you can actually visit. And this is just an indicative list. There's a huge amount of other museums beyond what I'm showing here that you can actually visit and grasp the idea of what contemporary art is all about. The Guggenheim Museums, notably the one in New York, it's one of the first institutions that hosts and boasts international contemporary art. There are Guggenheim Museums around the world, such as in Venice, in Bilbao, and I think there are a few coming up in the United Arab Emirates too. There's the Hamburger Bahnhof in Berlin, along with many other, of course, institutions in Berlin. The Centre Pompidou in Paris, and Centre Pompidou there's another one in another city in France, which I cannot remember. There's the Tate institution, like the Tate Modern in London, Tate Britain, there's Tate Liverpool, there's Tate St. Ives. There's lots of different institutions that actually you can visit either online or physically and try to get information about contemporary art, which information then can be transmitted and transferred into audiences, if these are students, pupils of whatever age. Most museums also have educational programs which are published online, and these educational programs can actually be demonstrated during a class environment. But apart from visiting museums, you can also try to incorporate art fairs. Art fairs, a bit more commercial than museums. Art fairs happen annually, usually. There's art fairs everywhere in the world, in every country that you actually think of. I'm just giving much importance into Art Basel, which is originally came out in Basel in Switzerland, but also exists in Miami, in Hong Kong, and maybe somewhere else I can't remember now. But this is an art fair, which is a commercial, of course, fair that people can go and buy. Not so much individuals, but mostly institutional clients. But it's the volume of these fairs, like museums and like other institutions, and the money that goes into these events that actually allows art to be very expansive. And I'm just showing you an example of an artwork from a previous Art Basel edition by an Indian artist named Sutop Gupta, which is, again, a project which could not be realized if it didn't happen in a bigger kind of environment or institution with these with a certain amount of money or budget allocated to it. So this obviously, these are not works that can actually be shown in our next door gallery. That's why we need these bigger institutions to appreciate art in a bigger volume. This particular work, which I'm not going to go into many details. I just want to say to you, the works I've chosen to show you during my presentation today are works that directly deal with sustainability, whether this is environment, whether this is identity, whether this is as well-being or equality. And this particular one, it's a participatory project as well as an interactive project where people can actually go and meet inside this installation. It's called Cooking the Word, and that was from the 2017 edition of Art Basel. And next chapter would be the art institutions that we have around the world. I start with Venice Biennale, which probably most of you know. It's the oldest, and it's the first Biennale of its kind. It started in the late 19th century in Venice, when the City Council of Venice decided that they should actually expose contemporary art of the time to the crowds. First exhibition went on in 1895. So it's more than 100 years old institution. The word Biennale means biennial, so that means it happens every 2 years. Venice Biennale started in 1895 and has been on the odd years. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, this had to change again, because last edition of 2020, which was the Biennale of Architecture, had to be postponed to 2021. So as of this year, the Venice Biennale of Art will be on the even years. It starts in May and goes until November, and it's a huge gathering of contemporary art. And this is what the latest contemporary art could be all about. There's a curated show, a curated exercise where artists are invited to present the work. And there's also country participations in two main venues in Venice, one being the Giardini and the other one being the Arsenale. And this institution, because of its budget and its affluence in providing money to artists, invited artists, can actually give us big scale works that we can really appreciate and see away from our everyday art scene of our own countries. And this is what I'm showing here. It's an installation by Lorenzo Quinn, the building bridges installation, which are huge hands making a bridge in the canals of Venice. Another institution that started in the 70s, the Sculpture Park, the Sculpture Project Park in Münster. It happens every 10 years. It goes for 100 days and starts in June until September in the city of Münster, which is in Westphalia. It's in northwest of Germany. It started off as a main criticism to public art, because an artist had installed a public sculpture in the city, and there was a huge debate and controversy about that kind of installation. So the city itself decided to create this sculpture park, to invite artists every 10 years to come into the city. The platform is the city itself, so there's no museum, there's no gallery, there's no space concern. So the city is the whole platform for the art to be demonstrated. And here again, because of the budget, because of all these big volume art, we can experience works that cannot be experienced in a smaller art gallery. And I'm showing you here an example of a Turkish artist, Ayşe Ekmen, where she installed a non-visible bridge in one of the canals of Münster, and people could actually walk on and cross the river, thinking of giving references, of course, to other bigger religious images of separating the waters to walk through. And last but not least, the Documenta institution, which again started in the 50s in Kassel, another 200 kilometers away from Münster. It's an hour from Frankfurt, a small city in Germany again. It started in the 50s when Arnaud Baudet, an artist and an academic back then, wanted to bring Germany back into the art scene, because as a result of the Second World War, Germany had been quite isolated from the rest of the world. So this is an institution that started in 1955. It goes every 5 years. So an exhibition will happen in every 5 years. And that's where it goes for 100 days from June to September again. So if it coincides with Münster Sculpture Park, it's a good excuse to visit Germany. The last edition of Documenta, number 14, was in 2017. That was Documenta, which for the first time, it went away from Kassel and actually took place in Athens, Greece. That's where the curator wanted to bring the notion of Documenta breaking away from its physical, geographical space and going to another country. And it had a very specific political message back then, saying that we learn from Athens. And again, here we see big scale projects like this Marta Minuhin installation of the Parthenon of books, very much associated with sustainability, because it has to do with equality, it has to do with well-being, etc., etc. And this is actually a same scale volume as the Parthenon of Athens, but made of steel and books, which are forbidden by censorship. And this is the main square of Kassel, of course. That was in 2017. In Athens, another participatory as well as interactive project where Rashid Arain, another artist, invited people to come and taste the food from his own country. A very interesting installation which took place both in Athens and Kassel, and I find this image very, very sort of striking for me, and very kind of challenging, because it actually is a marble-made tent weighing more than 100 tons, which of course reflects to sustainable issues such as refugees, immigration, etc., etc. But where it's placed exactly opposite the Parthenon of Athens, it comes into a direct dialogue with so many different meanings that you can get out of it. There was a Canadian artist, Rebecca Belmore, and it was called From the Inside in 2017. And of course, I just end up with this favorite slide of mine, which is the main museum in Kassel, which is the main venue for Documenta every year. And okay, if I had time, I would like to open up a discussion with you and ask you, where is the art here? But okay, I will let it out. It was one of the biggest controversies of Documenta. It's one of the most expensive projects that ever happened for Documenta, costing many hundred thousands of euros, and it's actually invisible. It's non-material. This is by a British artist, Ryan Gander. It is the main first entrance to the Museum of Kassel when you go into Documenta, and the work is actually air that comes out from all these tubes that come out from an airplane engine. So there are lots of different debates and discussions you can actually formulate after visiting or after showing this kind of works. And I end up with Larnaca Biennale, a much smaller, of course, production of a Biennale. This is the one we're actually focusing on, is the second edition of Larnaca Biennale, which happened in 2021. It started in October until November 2021. That gave us, the CARE project, the opportunity to go and see a gathered show of various artists from around the world, not of course at the volume or expense of other bigger institutions, but it was good enough for us to present an educational program there in November in 2021, 2021 and actually get people involved with works. And I'm just finishing off with some of the works that we had seen at Larnaca Biennale, and then I will give the floor to my colleague Victoria, who is going to expand on the educational program that we had with people during the Biennale. So yes, I think we should open up to new learning environments, not just the classroom, and I thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Costa. So I will continue our presentation, and let me share again, my screen again. So during the CARE project, we didn't have the opportunity to go with the teachers to visit exhibitions as we planned to. All the visits were done virtually. And then when we were able, so in November 2021, we had the opportunity to go to the Larnaca Biennale. So you can see here that we had an open, free workshop for educators. So we wanted to explore what education can learn from contemporary practice and current exhibitions, and why should we take children to contemporary exhibition. So this was roughly a 2-hour workshop, and the audience were primary and secondary school teachers, as well as university students in arts education. So we had, 12 respondents, and this was roughly the maximum. 15 was the maximum number that we could have because of COVID restrictions. So we had 2 parts. The first one was run by Costas, who, talk about ways of understanding, communicating, being in a dialogue with pictures and artworks. And also he talked about major art events connected with sustainable development goals. And the second part was a short presentation by me regarding contextual responding activities. These presentations, this workshop, utilize methodologies employed during the training program that we offer to in-service teachers in the context of the CARE project. So a brief presentation about how they should try to how they should go about being in a dialogue with artworks and not try to judge them before they really study them, and how to build on children's curiosity and interest, how to offer opportunities of engagement through emotions, empathy, cognition, and senses. And so after my shorter presentation, we divided the participants in groups, and we tried to balance individual and group activities. Each group were given an envelope, the one that I'm holding now, and inside the envelope there was a card, one for each participant, so it was 2-sided. And we also had scissors and drawing paper and an envelope with the artist's statement. So the activities focused on how to value viewers' voices and not to offer ready-made interpretations. And we would like to think that they acted as inspirations for educators on how to relate art education, visits to art galleries with challenging current issues. Just you saw the artworks. We divided the participants in different groups, so they studied different artworks. One of these was the one that Costas showed before, and it focused on consumption, possession, pollution. To what are we saying okay? In the right, you can see the artist's statement, which was given. It was in an envelope inside the folder that was given to the participants, and there was a point where they were directed to read this statement. So the other 3 artworks dealt also with challenging problems too. Bottom left, which is actually the proposal of the Collectiva, is dealing with ecological issues. The one on the top, which is a floating white village with houses stuck together without any space for alleys, streets, or parks, or so on. Again, it deals with ecological and social sustainability. And the one on the right, which is actually two pieces, the one on the top is a video, and on the bottom it's a painting. It deals with separation lines, with displacement. There are more details that you can see here. So these were the 4 artworks that we focused during the Larnaca Biennale. And we tried to balance individual engagement with the artwork and group interpretation. They had different tasks that they had to respond to. Initially, the group had to find the artwork, so they were given a small piece of the artwork, and then they were invited to do in-depth descriptions. Have in mind that we are the group. We didn't know what kind of art experiences the group had, so some were primary school teachers, generalist teachers. So we started with basic things like, what do you see? What do you actually see? Not what do you think that you see? And then try to connect these activities with what can you do with children if you are having them with you. The third kind of activities ask participants to wonder and to pose questions, to pose these questions to their group members or to listen to their answers. The fourth kind of activity was inviting participants to play actually with the artwork, to make imaginary journeys. And this was they spent the majority of their time here because they actually enjoyed it a lot. So I remember approaching a group that was dealing with the artwork that you can see here. And one of the members imagined that he was driving a small, I wrote what he said to me actually in the instruction, but it wasn't that the instruction. He was driving a yellow car, and how terrifying he was to be in this inside this artwork. And then he talked about what he was feeling, seeing, hearing, and so on. After this kind of play, the participants were invited to read the artist's statement and to discuss with them what actually was their personal interpretation of the work, and what kind of activities they could do with artists. And I think I took too much time. Sorry about that. I was carried away. The last part wasn't done due to restrictions of the time. And on the left, you can see on the right, you can see that we plan for other activities to be done during, to use after the CARE project. That was an activity that was planned during December, but unfortunately, due to COVID, it didn't actually took place. But we are on the outlook for other opportunities during art events. Sorry, Ernst, about the time. You should have stopped me.
It was not a waste of time. It was really very, very inspiring, very great. Thank you very much. Big applause. So we have 5 minutes questions and answers. Are there any questions? Yeah, so Penny.
Hi everyone, and thank you for helping me out. And so I'm so sorry I couldn't find the link anywhere. It's like, help. Yes, that was really fascinating, and my particular interest, Costas, you might not have seen in the chat, but Andy Ash at the Institute of Education in London, and I'm at Basel University in the UK. We're both very committed to the artist teacher scheme. I was one of the designers when I was teaching at Goldsmiths in the 90s, and it was so refreshing to see your commitment to contemporary art practice. And you started your presentation by saying you're not a teacher, but actually, it's kind of phrase from Joseph Beuys, every classroom is an artwork, and you are a teacher. And I think what's interesting is across, and Andy will he might want to come in here, I might put him on the spot. But actually, you know, the best art education in the UK is where the students are with the art in the contemporary world, with your care issues, real world learning, but also with the issues that contemporary artists are working with every day. So I think it was really inspiring. I just want to say thank you. And maybe my question is this, that what can we do to embed this in different education systems? Andy, did you want to comment on that? I'm going to ask you. Before,
yeah, I'm up. Sorry, I was just struggling with the mic. Yeah, no, totally agree. I think one of the, like you, it's been sort of over 20 years of my own practice, but also my teaching, and I see the two correlate and synergize very well. Not just my own making, but my own sort of relationship to the teaching practice. So that makes perfect sense to me. I'm just going to put a link in something that I'm presently working on, if people might be interested, which is a collaboration with a contemporary art gallery and a network of artist teachers around the world. And like Ernst mentioned earlier, the pandemic was something that sort of has really drawn attention to the need for artist teachers to come together, to collaborate and to be able to develop. Because sadly, as clearly as Victoria and the team are identifying, that kind of specialist training for artist teachers, that kind of specialist knowledge in developing your understanding in terms of contemporary practice is sadly lacking, and not something that is necessarily on the agenda for schools, not on the agenda for the management, not on the agenda for governments. And so these kinds of projects, these kinds of initiatives are kind of the only spaces that are left these days to be able to give that very specialist type of artist teacher insight into contemporary practice. So I'll stop there. So well done. Thank you, Costas. Thank you, Victoria.
Just to add that it's not only for the artist teachers, there's even a bigger need for generalist teachers. So in our case, in primary schools, it's even more needed. I cannot think of another word. And how we go forward is by taking these teachers to the exhibitions to experience themselves. I mean, the positive feedback that we had after the event in Biennale Larnaca means that you need to take them to experience it and then work through that. And the spaces is through projects.
I totally agree, Victoria. Sorry, I should have said that. So I'm involved, like Andy is in specialising in secondary, I specialise in primary, but all of the classrooms, inverted commas, that we set up, I'll put one in the link so you can see. But Costas, back to you.
I would also add to what Victoria is saying, that it's also to do with policies. And I think, unfortunately, there's an international policy against culture and art. And that's something that has to be rethought and reintroduced into our everyday living. But it has to come from the political systems, not from individual people. So I think this is something that we should think into investing in the future and reinvent our policies.
I would like to connect this discussion to our topic. The topic is sustainability. And Costas, if I understood you right, then you are stressing the observation that art events, art exhibitions, art fairs are globalizing. So they are spreading everywhere. We don't have no longer a Tate only in London, but also some a Louvre all over the world, and so on, and biennales all over the world. So it's a kind of globalization. Is this?
It's true.
Is that your message? What you wanted to say?
No. The message wasn't to. I didn't want to stress on the globalization. I just wanted to give out that there are opportunities around the world. And the center is not just one. I mean, the periphery is a center nowadays. So I was just giving out suggestions and examples of what is near.
I want to drag you in a specific direction. You see.
that everything is globalized. Everything is globalized, and unfortunately sometimes recycled.
And if we talk about this kind of globalization, this goes in parallel to the globalization of, for instance, climate change. So we are dealing with something that is no longer related to one specific place and no longer related to one specific nation or country. So we are really in the respect to what, when we talk about sustainability, then we talk about, for instance, these effects, or we are talking about migration, what happens through migration, and migration touches not only one part of the world, it touches the whole world. And I think this kind of global thinking in art education, that is what we really have to tackle. Would you go with me with this consequence?
Yeah, I think this is what, even from the CARE project, this is what we're trying to set up, this art community, which goes beyond borders and trying to get everyone together. So yes, yeah.
And this leads me to a final question, because you always, as a teacher or as an artist, you have to select something. For instance, what you selected at the Biennale in Larnaca, you selected specific artworks. So what are the criteria for this selection of the artworks?
Are you talking to me personally?
Or Victoria? You are in a package.
Okay, I think both Victoria and I would selected works that speak to us, communicate with us firstly. So the personal kind of understanding, cognition and taste, it's a very essential element. But also we selected works that actually dealt directly with the sustainable goals that we're actually talking about. So yeah, we had another criteria that made it easier. Not Victoria? Yeah.
Yes, I would agree. And also we had the opportunity to have local artists and, artists from other countries. So again, we tried to have this balance as well.
Okay. So thank you very much. We go on now with Charmaine, who immediately gives an answer to this question of how can such a project related to the specific local situation. So thank you very much again, Victoria and Costas, for your wonderful presentation. And I hand over to Charmaine.
Thank you, Ernst, and everyone for the good contribution that you're giving this morning. It's a learning experience indeed. So I'm Charmaine Zammit. I'm from Malta, education officer, and I also lecture in the Department of Art Education at University of Malta. And I'm going to start sharing my screen. Okay, so the question was local or international artwork. What is best? And I'm going to share the Maltese experience. Okay, so the CARE implementation, January and April 2021 in Malta, the artworks that teachers referred to were not restricted to the list of artworks that we provided during the course. That surprised me a bit. And when I've seen their lesson plans, when I've seen what they were doing, most of them referred to international artworks by Anselm Kiefer, Dufe, Rauschenberg, Duchamp, Joseph Beuys. Why? Because most of them related to themes about environment concerns, life on land. The next slide, in fact, can show examples taken from a teacher, one of the teacher participant slides. So these were the works, most of them preferred to inspire students with. However, there was a teacher participant who referred to contemporary local art from the CBT course that we've done, and also artworks created by the teacher participants themselves during the course. Why? Because the theme that he chose was public art, and it was a theme that we also covered during the course. And in fact, here the image shows one of the designs by the teachers, participants themselves. And of course, I could see the reason why he felt that, listen, this will be relevant. And most of the local artworks are relevant because he took a team that is relevant to students, a team that is relevant to Malta right now. And from experience now as an art education officer and the previous head of department, I see that most art teachers in Malta refer to local art only when they are relating to themes such as Maltese landscapes, Catholic religion, and heritage. They show a lot of pride, for instance, with the Caravaggio that we have in Valletta, the St. John's Cathedral. Those of you who came to Malta, visited Malta, of course, probably are familiar with this as well. So what I think when art teachers in Malta go through professional development, such as the one that we've been through for the CARE project, and they start connecting art lessons to life, including, of course, students' immediate surroundings, the contemporary themes, the sustainable development goals. I think that is when they start referring to contemporary local art as well. So both international and local contemporary art. For instance, when dealing directly with issues that are impacting, that are frustrating the Maltese right now, such as the excessive construction. And next slide, in fact, I can relate to a local artist's work, that of Steve Bonello. And briefly, the artwork refers to the over-construction going on in Malta, which has become a serious problem in recent years, given the perception that the country's economy would collapse if the construction industry were to slow down. So in the context of ESD, this cartoon drawing, and my reason for selecting this cartoon drawing is because students of any age, both the primary students, secondary students, would relate a lot with this kind of art. We can also raise discussions concerning the SDG, particularly SDG 9, Industry, Innovation and Infrastructure, and SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Community. And there I'm showing a quote by Alfred Sant, economist, who was a former prime minister as well. Land in Malta is the scarcest and the most valuable resource. Clear limitations should exist regarding what percentage of land available is to be allocated to development. So as students start observing the artwork and engaging with it, they can gain awareness about sustainable economies, infrastructure, which generate a balance between the economy and our natural environment. They can also reflect on issues such as urbanization, sustainable transport systems in cities, air pollution, and natural heritage. Students can practice how to respond critically to a cartoon like this. Of course, it takes a teacher's inquiry-based approach for this, and they can start interpreting its meaning whilst reflecting about their role in improving their local context. So it's useless always pointing the finger. It's very important that students themselves, or the current generation and future generation, to start thinking, what can I do? Or how can I work? How can I collaborate with others to do something for this, rather than keep pointing fingers or keep expecting others to act? So students' reflections then can lead to the possibility of visualizing change and the importance of future thinking while being sensitive to citizens' well-being. And here I'm going to give a practical suggestion. And it's when eliciting students' observations, interpretations, as I mentioned, through inquiry-based approach, the teacher has to keep in mind the description and the message of the artwork, of course, not starting with the description and telling them the message, but trying to elicit from the students themselves. It's always important, and this makes the students reflect. As a description, for instance, the drawing shows a billboard promoting natural scenery against the background of high-rise buildings and cranes, which is a stark contrast between the bright colors and the curvy landscapes on the billboard. And then you see the monotonous, repetitive black and white backdrop. And the message is authorities promote an image of nature that is simultaneously being destroyed by the so-called developers in the background. So teachers can elicit students' observation of this artwork. They can start by guiding questions such as, what can you see in the picture? What do you see that makes you say so? What kind of artwork in the picture? What is it showing as technique? So they can go into techniques. It's always good to keep a balance for a holistic art education. So techniques are still important. And unfortunately, in Malta, most art teachers are still focusing on the technical aspect of art education, which is why when you try to introduce them to contemporary art, they usually start arguing, but we are losing the artists, because for them, art is still techniques. And I always question them, are you still assessing what is art with the way we used to assess what is art, the technical aspects? So it's still important, and it's still good to include questions that require students to appreciate techniques in artworks, but it's not the only thing. So even, for instance, this can also be used for the aerial perspective, the linear perspective. So these are all things that can still be included in the art lessons, but not only. And so this is also a suggestion, because while students are discussing, observing the local artworks, and they can eventually also communicate their feelings through their own creation on seeing land of important ecological value in their locality being degraded, unfortunately. So here's an activity that I would be suggesting to art teachers, because yes, I noticed that some of them are afraid to include contemporary art, are afraid to include the new approaches because they don't feel good enough. And it's not their fault. For the past 7 years, 8 years, art education, our art teachers were not having teacher training. And nowadays, this year, specifically 2021, 2022, the scholastic year, is dedicated to teacher training. All subjects are going to teacher training every term. And in fact, next Monday, we'll be starting the next training term. So with regards to this activity, think of a town in your country or your hometown. So we're connecting to the students' immediate surroundings. Imagine you had the power, a magic wand, depending on the student's age group, of course, to make changes so that you and other citizens can enjoy clean air, a harmonious skyline, a peaceful atmosphere where you can listen to birds, connect with student senses. It's very important. You can smell flowers, where you can take long walks or cycle. You can play outdoor games, hide and seek in the road without being afraid of cars passing by. So then with reference to your imagination, you create a mind map with annotations, thumbnail sketches, attached images of your imaginations. And the important aspect also that students share their ideas, their imaginings, and finding what is similar to them among other students or what is contrast. And this is a very good way of exchanging experiences, imaginations, ideas among students. And again, so they can pair up, they can team up and prepare sketches using linear aerial perspective. So then again, there's the perspective techniques being included, and develop an artwork that could be a drawing, a cartoon, a billboard design inspired by this particular artwork here, but it could be also a painting, a collage, a three-dimensional setup, entitled A Peaceful Town. And there we see what a peaceful town for the students is, especially when they are going through this scenery most of the days of seeing cranes and dust all over, and it's very hard to breathe clean air. Everywhere is becoming an eyesore, and the natural environment is being sacrificed. So then students can present their works, they can invite, this can invite peer evaluation. Eventually, students' voice, students' concerns can be also in public. How? By students' exhibition, an exhibition of students' creative process, what they went through for this, where they show their mind maps, their notes. Maybe some of them can also create some simple poetry as well. And the exhibition can be at the school, which is a public venue, but it can also be held at other public venues in Malta. Or due to COVID nowadays, it can also be a virtual exhibition through the school's website and through Facebook page, which is very much used by Maltese schools and by Maltese themselves. So another suggestion for students at very early age, at primary, for the same theme of a peaceful town, could be a 3D setup. And then they could also do a role play with imaginary characters of citizens or animals and what it feels like to live in a peaceful town. And another suggestion here, and this is the work of one of the teacher participants for CARE project, and in relation to SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, this participant, she engaged her students in a cleanup by collecting plastic trash from their neighborhood. So it was a continuation. So even a continuation of such a theme, the peaceful town, it could be asking students, what can you do as an individual or in collaboration with your family, with your friends? What can you do to take action for a peaceful town, for a peaceful neighborhood? So it goes from current situation to students' imagination, and that's where the teacher's role should be, how to stimulate this imagination, rather than giving up hope when we see that probably we're out of control with this over-construction going on. But using imagination and then listen, so let's put into practice our imagination. What can we do? How can we ourselves make a change, small changes? We cannot change the world. We cannot change Malta overnight, but everyone can make an effort for a small change. And when you create this collaboration together, and these small changes can also leave a ripple effect. So to conclude here, the current situation in Malta. In recent national, I told you that right now we're going through teacher training sessions in Malta. So there's term one was in December. And while doing the teacher training sessions, showing examples of local artworks, including also those of art teachers among them, because most art teachers in Malta are artists themselves. Most teachers look surprised, as I told you before. They start saying, but with this contemporary art, we are losing the techniques, we are losing art. And then, of course, they admitted that they keep referring to international artworks because they have never been exposed much to local art, neither when they were students, not even during their art pedagogic training. I remember me, myself, when I was still a student, it was only Italian artists usually that we studied, that we appreciated. And going to the Malta National Museum, the collection was mostly Italian Renaissance and Italian Baroque. So this is the way we grew up. Then even for my bachelor's in education, that's what I've been exposed to mostly. And we never had exposure to what was going around in the world, in the art world. So contemporary art was only introduced to me because I chose to do a master's in art education and then a PhD. But I admit that if I never tried to enroll myself in other courses, specialized courses of art education at University of Malta or elsewhere, probably I would be still thinking like the art teachers that are working in the schools in Malta today, and thinking that, listen, art has to show a specialized technique. Art has to show detailed work, detailed drawings, and artworks that resemble the reality of what we see, which today is done by photographs. So yes, our teachers' lessons don't concern contemporary issues, don't concern sustainable development issues and stuff. So slowly now they are being introduced to this, and I was confident of this, that they will start arguing, they will resist this, but then I kept in mind that they will resist it because they are too comfortable with what they know, with the familiar, and this is like new terrain for them. And yes, they do need training, they need exposure, and that is why the way forward, using the care experience, and the teacher participants are already, they already offered that they can share their experience with art teachers in Malta, with the rest of the art teachers. So the training will make use of the care resources, such as the handbook that Victoria mentioned, and the artist templates created, not only the local, but also the international. So I will expose them to both, and I will provide them with opportunities to engage with these artworks, and finding ways of including them in lesson plans, schemes of work, and building this professional learning community among all art teachers in Malta, teaching all ages from primary level to high school, so that they can share resources and don't feel isolated, because that is something else, unfortunately, in Malta. Most teachers plan their stuff, do their things, and they isolate themselves. They don't share. They find it very difficult to share. So as the one who trains the art teachers, I do my best to share my resources, my plans, and how I would use, which approaches I would use. So eventually they start sharing as well. And I told them, listen, today it's very easy to share. We've done also a repository for art resources, teaching plans, schemes of work and stuff. So yes, I am quite confident, quite positive that the care project will be of help to provide them with examples, resources, so they start connecting art lessons to real life issues. And then, of course, after all this and observing again what's going on, I will be able to present whether local international artworks or international artworks are best for the Maltese art teachers to use. So I conclude with that note, and thank you for listening to my presentation. And if there's time for any questions that have arisen.
Yeah, thank you very much, Charmaine.
Welcome.
Wonderful presentation.
Okay.
And I was very happy to comment it, that you were addressing the topics that are so relevant in our context. So the question of resources, the resources in respect to peace. Peace is a resource. Fresh air or clean air is a resource, land is a resource we are living from. And I think these are really these challenges that we have to face today. And the question is always, how can we address arts education into respect to these challenging topics? And thank you very much for showing these convincing examples. And what I learned from you, and please correct me if I'm wrong, what I learned from you is that you are thinking in 3 stages, so or in 3 different directions. The first one would be visualizing change. So just being aware of what is happening, for instance, in respect to land, and to visualize through art education, to visualize this change, your observation. The second one, what I could discover in your presentation is also to create a space of utopia, what I would call. So showing this nice trees in this pop-up things. So is creating or addressing something which we would like to have, to see that there is a discrepancy between what we are experiencing every day and what we could imagine. And I think this was the third, and for me it was very convincing to address this imagination or this imagining, which is always a core issue in arts education. Imagine.
Yes, and giving hope.
Yeah,
because otherwise we give up.
Yeah, but not only just imagining, but also to put into action.
Yes,
and I think this was, I think, for me, it was a very convincing example how you could address these very relevant societal relevant topics throughout education. Did I understand you right, or?
Very much. And I agree with you that just keeping hoping and imagining and expecting others to do all the work while we just sit, that is not the right approach. We have to imagine, and then we start seeing ways of taking action. And I think that is something that the students need to learn from all this. So through art, while observing and creating art through imagination, they can start coming up. And as I said, once an exhibition of all these works and thoughts, students are showing their concerns. It's the current generation of students, current generation of citizens showing concerns, and they can literally start making these small changes. And the people who see their art, the people who read students' notes and stuff that they do, and they can start thinking as well. So it's a ripple effect that I am thinking of. I think, yes, it can happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
You have to mute. Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Charmaine, thanks very much for that.
Welcome.
Lots of things were whizzing through my head in relation to what's the name of the artist that did the billboard?
It's Steve Bonello. There's a website. He does cartoons for the newspaper, the main newspaper, Times of Malta. Okay. And yes, he always manages to spark.
It raised lots of levels of thinking. I mean, we could take the background image of the buildings, the Maltese buildings, and relate them to things like the curriculum, to the kind of structures that we have in place, and according to which we work and so on, and which form some kind of control mechanisms on our lives. And we can think about the painted landscape overlapping them in some ways, some kind of that which is being excluded from the structures that we have in place. And how is it then that we can begin to deal with that? How can we become conscious of the frameworks within which we operate as educators? in order not to exclude and to marginalize that which those structures tend to do, if you see what I'm getting at. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me then, one of the ideas I've been working on at the moment is this notion of pagan pedagogies. In other words, that which lies outside of established frameworks of pedagogical thinking. And you refer to them in terms of your art teachers and how they are gripped by certain forms of practice. Mm-hmm. It seems to me that it's not a matter of excluding those forms of practice, but of recognizing, if you like, their limitations and what they may marginalize. And because when we look at contemporary art, these artists are puncturing the frameworks that hold us. And so we can learn from them and so on. And my interest is how we can, if you like, puncture the curriculum frameworks which are holding us, which are largely controlled by a kind of neoliberal economics and the world that wants to create, so that we can have forms of curriculum which leads to other forms of living, other forms of life, which are more sustainable, because we know that the current forms of socioeconomic activity are unsustainable. Mm-hmm. And they are the ones that are tending to control curriculum policy in my country and many others. Mm-hmm. So, how, you know, what is being excluded and what, sorry, I'm going on a bit, but those are the kind of thoughts I was thinking about whilst you were showing those images.
Yes, to answer your question, always with the Maltese context right now, that's why I told them before, the CARE project came at the right time, because in Malta, the syllabi are changing finally. So, and they are more emphasizing the creative process. And the creative process is not only about techniques as it used to be. It includes a more holistic approach towards art education, and it includes also interdisciplinarity. So it's not just art for art's sake anymore. And students need to be provided with this context and stimulation to see what's around them and to talk, to discuss, dialogue about life, about what's going on right now. So when you start seeing that the student is no longer not only the future workforce, but you start seeing the student as a human being, then art education and all kinds of other subject education should really start seeing and providing students with an education that will serve them for life. Not only for the workforce, not only to become a graphic designer eventually, or to become an artist.
But to be a human, extend the possibility of being, it seems to me.
I'm not hearing. Could you repeat, please?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, no.
It seems to me that what you're talking about is recognizing what Erin Manning calls the minor gestures of being, which tend to be ignored in different forms of practice and so on, in order to expand these potentials. And in expanding these potentials, we expand the potential of what it means to become human or to be human.
Yes, because at times we forgot that in education.
Exactly.
In Malta, I see it many times. I mean, teachers struggling so that students can then become an engineer or a lawyer or a doctor, etc. And even when you talk to parents, you see this as well. My son is good at art, but what is he going to do then? What is he going to work as? So there's still this mentality of needing to study, needing to learn for work, for a future work, instead of for a full human being. And this is unfortunately creating then the way people value, the way citizens value things. for some people, the buildings, the over-construction is progress.
Yeah.
It's good for the economy. It is something good. So it's like these values that we need to start discussing with students and with everyone for active citizenship at the end of the day, and start valuing what's more human.
So sorry, Charmaine, for interrupting because we are running out of time. And there are two more questions, one from Teresa in the chat and one by Victoria. Perhaps I'm just reading now the questions by Teresa and ask Victoria to follow immediately, and then you can do a final answer. Is this okay?
Yes.
So the question of Teresa is, can you explain a bit more about the peer assessment of students' projects? Who set up the assessment criteria? The students, what kind of criteria? Are they related to the SDGs? So this was the first question. And Victoria, you have a second question.
No, it was just a comment to what Dennis was saying, that how do we realize our restrictions, is that even it's needed for us as academics as well. And through the project, I think everybody started realizing the restrictions within their context. When you are starting discussing, other people's context, then it's beneficial for us too, because sometimes you are in the university doing certain things and then you need something else. So the project also help academics to, refocus their work as well. This is just a comment.
Thank you. So Charmaine, a brief answer, please, to the question of assessment.
Okay, so regarding peer assessment and also self-assessment by students, it's important that teachers share the learning outcomes. And so what the intention, what students will reach, will attain during and also by the end of a project or topic. And so students know what they are doing. And it is through this, or perhaps for the younger ones, using art rubrics, that they can offer peer assessments to each other, or they can self-assess their own works. Of course, this can also be done by asking students to present their work in progress, not just the final work. Because as we know, unfortunately, what I see in Malta, many times students simply copy something. And okay, they might be good at drawing skills or painting skills, etc. But they did not develop ideas. They did not develop their work. They just copied. So it's important that students know what they have to go through, the development of ideas and stuff. So that is how they can then assess their own work and that of others, guided by the teachers depending on the age of students. Of course. Okay. I hope I answered this question from experience.
I think we could talk about this for hours. Yes. More. But I see that in the chat there is a parallel discussion about utopia, and Harriet was contributing to this. And I think this is now the right time to say thank you, Charmaine, for this wonderful presentation again. And to hand over to Harriet from Exeter, UK, to give her presentation, and perhaps you can also tackle the question of utopia.
I'll try, thank you. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, but not yet now.
Okay, lovely. Yes, so good morning. My name is Harriet and I work at the University of Exeter. And I have to confess that I am a science specialist, so I feel somewhat of an imposter at an arts conference. So forgive me for my lack of art expertise. But I wanted to share with you one of the case studies from a visual arts unit from one of our students here in the UK, and looking at a particular theme that she chose and that I wanted just to talk about. which fits in absolutely beautifully with particularly Charmaine's talk just now. It's really segued really nicely. So this is Bella's work. So Bella, we have to use pseudonyms because of ethical considerations, but we'll call her Bella. And she wanted to focus on conviviality. And conviviality was something that came up in our big ideas section of the CARE proposal, where we looked at, I guess, specifically convivial conservation. So how we can live with each other, how we can live with nature, how we are part of nature, and how we can think about the future of our planet in a convivial sense. Bella actually is an English specialist, an English language specialist. So she was neither art nor science specialist. And she really chimed with the idea of conviviality. It spoke to her, and she developed her scheme of work around this concept. And also it being a principle of post-growth conservation. So thinking about beyond economic growth to a different way of thinking about the economy as well. So this is a really long quote, which I won't read out, but it's from a really interesting article, which I reference at the back, which defines conviviality in a conservation sense. So how we can coexist as different species, and rather than necessarily having a dichotomy. And actually in Charmaine, in your talk with the billboard, that really struck me as being a really nice example of that dichotomy, where you have nature and people as these two separate entities. And the idea of convivial conservation is to really bring these two things together and have humans and all species interrelate with each other, and in an equitable way. And this also includes a bigger political picture. So thinking about agricultural systems and economic systems as well. So Bella's heading, I suppose, her aims were looking at her particular town now and the future, and also the town's regeneration. And again, regeneration is being slightly different from sustainability. So sustaining things at the same rate is not really what we're looking for. We were looking to kind of regenerate our practices. And so the main focus was looking at introducing children to the idea of biodiversity and conviviality, and to look more specifically at their local area, not just the big charismatic biomes like the ocean and the rainforest. And they wanted, she wanted to empower children to recognise their own knowledge of features and places of value and importance in their town and local area. So it was a very local study. And she related it to 5 of the 6 big ideas from the project, and specific. So we did a teacher training course as part of the project. We all did, and one of them was conservation and change, and that's where she got the conviviality information from. She also related it to 5 of the Sustainable Development Goals, and arguably she could have added the goal 8, which is looking at economic growth. And I wanted just to, because we talked about this together at one point, and we talked about the concept of economic growth and how that's actually really at odds with conviviality, that really conviviality is more about economic justice and redistribution of wealth and sharing what we have rather than this exponential growth. And we tried to find some helpful support from governmental policy and bodies about degrowth or about economic justice, and we couldn't find anything at all. So we were hoping that perhaps in the future we might change our way of thinking, our way of being around this idea of economic growth, and that we might have a different kind of language. I think that's really what Bella's project, one of the main results was, I think, was that it changed the way that she thinks and the way she is in the world, and the children that she taught, it changed their way of thinking about the world through a convivial approach. So in terms of artwork, one of the templates that we offered our trainees was one by Rebecca Chesney, who's from the north of England, and she developed a really very convivial piece of artwork that was set up in Liverpool, where she planted 2 square acres of what was sort of a brownfield site wasteland with flowers. 1 square was full of bright yellow flowers and 1 square was full of bright blue flowers, and it was very beautiful. It was really striking, and especially in a city centre where those kind of colours and patterns maybe aren't so well, actually, even in natural systems, you wouldn't find those striking contrasts. But the very nature of it was convivial because it invited children to come and explore. So children loved going into the wildflower meadows and seeing what they could find, the bugs and insects, and how they soon realised that those bugs and insects would attract vertebrates and other species to their city. And so that's what it looked like. And it also introduced lots of species that are rarer now as well. She also chose some other artists to influence her work and to introduce to the children. One of them was the moon installation by Luke Jerram, which is an installation that moves around. I think there's several moons now that are orbiting the Earth, and it's a projection of the moon, which is extremely lifelike and very affecting. And also nearby there is a park which has an architectural school in it, and the theme of most of those architecture projects are to make structures, buildings, sculptures that are sympathetic to the natural environment and kind of blend in and that are beautiful. And she also introduced them to the architecture work of Frank Lloyd Wright, which is very similar in that sense, that the architecture kind of blends in and uses materials that are sustainable and sympathetic to the natural environment. So what happened in school then? So once she had introduced the children to some of those artworks, the children created a map story, and I've got a picture of one of these in a moment. So they took what they knew from their local town, and they drew it and used pictures and mapped it out. And they were provided with some photos and artworks, and they looked at different artistic styles, and they talked about whether or not their town had an approach to this, or whether it was kind of random, and how the artworks affected them. They recorded their perceptions of the town through drawings and words. They took a visit through the town and recorded their perceptions of it. And then the kind of final session from the unit was a workshop to create a new sculpture on conviviality. And they did that. She approached it that each group of children would have a different perspective. So they were looking at conviviality and biodiversity from either children and their families, from the view of nature, or from businesses and from farmers. So integrating economics and community in with nature in their town. And this is just one example from the group that she taught. And I think one of the most impressive pieces of feedback from the children was how much they loved doing the woodwork. I think that, I don't know if I'm correct in saying this, but from what I understand, woodwork isn't really done very much in primary schools in the UK anymore. It used to be a lot more popular and taught, but DT is one of the kind of, one of the many subjects that's being sidelined. And so they've never used a saw or a hammer before. And I think that in itself was quite transgressive of her to this is a year 3 class, to be using hammers and saws and woodworking. They used hinges and things as well. So they were quite, it was very, very hands-on and very engaging. The children absolutely loved it. And this sculpture was looking at things from nature's point of view. So they put a little hedgehog in there, and they brought natural or reclaimed resources to make the sculptures with. And they're on display in their school. And just to finish with, I've got a couple of reflections. So this is one of Bella's reflections from the project, where she was given another perspective on biodiversity and conviviality. The images of wooden structures were artistic as well as superb craftsmanship. So looking at architectural creativity and sustainability. And they illustrated what was possible for human settlement and demonstrated techniques that could be used in the children's model making. So quite a significant change, I think, in her way of thinking about conviviality. And also, I think that the courage it took for her to do the project in what is, so her school is quite conservative, and teaching in the UK is generally quite conservative as well. So I feel like she had quite a bit of courage to do this project. And the children's reflection, here are two of them, there were lots more, but so I think it's quite cool to use art to show a message. It shows happiness through colour, that we're thinking about how to tell somebody something. And I felt like that was a really empowering statement, that the children had learned about using art to tell a story. And with relation to the utopian imaginings and thinking about the ripple effect that Charmaine was talking about, and hope and conviviality, if we can express ourselves through sculpture or through artwork, you know, from a school age, that's a very powerful thing. And then I like the last sentence, or the last two sentences. I hadn't thought about nature and people being connected here. That's a new idea today. So the children understanding that deep ecology, or the interconnectedness that we have with all systems, is again quite a powerful message. And that's the end. So I'm happy to take any questions or discuss.
Yes, thank you very much, Harriet. Yeah. So thank you. What really struck me is from your presentation is that it is so important to have a kind of core idea, and I think conviviality is a wonderful core idea that really drives you and that really inspires you, and you always have to come back to this one core idea. On the one hand side, I think this is very important. And to come back to Costas' presentation in the beginning, talking about this big exhibitions, for instance, like the next Documenta that takes place this year, is curated by an Indonesian team from Ruang Grupa from Indonesia, and conviviality is one of their core aspects, I think. So I think you can come here and get inspired through the next Documenta. And I think this is one aspect, really, to focus on a kind of core idea that really drives you. But the other one is, and this is what I loved from your presentation very much, is that you have to be open to discover unexpected, what I would say, side effects that can become main effects. For instance, like, oh, I never was using a saw and a hammer, and this is a kind of experience of self-empowerment. I can do that. I can use it, and I think we have always to balance this. On the one hand side, not to lose our vision in respect to this big 5 ideas or whatever, or core ideas. On the other hand side, to be open to be aware of what is really happening and what are the effects on the students. So thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any questions? Or was it just so convincing that nobody has a question? Penny has a question.
Yeah, I was waiting, so I already asked one, but I will come in again. Thank you, Harriet. That was really brilliant. And yes, I did pick up, I didn't explain that my comment in the chat was, yes, my frustration that a lot of schools are conservative, because we have a conservative government, we won't go there. But also, I think mainly because the provocation around a philosophical inquiry, so your provocation or your student provocation around conviviality, if I can say it, I think it's also important to invite those open-ended inquiries, as you know, you're hinting to, and it's that idea that, you know, for instance, one of our schools is similarly in the same way inspired by the concept of enchantment with Jane Bennett. And if you have a chance later on to have a look at the film that I posted in the chat, it's only 3 minutes, but it's a 3-minute film that is a living classroom. It's a living forest, so it's not in school. We took over the Egg Theatre in Bath and then set it up as an inquiry-based opportunity for local schools. And I suppose my question back to you, Harriet, is this: it's, you know, how can we not only take learning out of school more often, and I think Cosmas said that earlier on, but very much around how can we bring in more my dyslexia is coming out really badly today, philosophical thinking and also inquiry-based learning around contemporary art practice particularly, so that we're trying to get rid of this kind of delivered packaged curriculum that's all about schemes of work and things that are set without those beautiful open spaces that Dennis was talking about earlier. So it's a big question, but you know, you can do it.
Yeah, I don't know the answer, but I think so just going back, I meant conservative with a small c, that I feel like the schools in the UK anyway are generally a little bit conservative, mainly because we just have, it is very prescriptive, and we have these external pressures that teachers face, and so there isn't space maybe to be brave and to be courageous. And I think, so I'm a science specialist, so I'm thinking about this, you know, in terms of art and science. I think there's an equivalence in some respects, that it's unusual to see teachers take children out and do some wild science experiments in the woods, because doesn't fit with a conservative pattern. It's risky, it's a bit dangerous. So I think that with teacher training, at least, we can encourage that kind of risk-taking and that bravery through that kind of scaffolded approach of saying, okay, well, let's take a little bit of a risk. You've done really well. Let's take a little bit of a bigger risk, and you've done really well, until they feel that, you know, that empowerment within them to be able to take those steps towards, whether that is with art or with science, into bigger spaces and bigger ideas, and you know, thinking, actually, I'm not going to do a topic this week on mini beasts. I'm going to do one on conviviality, which is more, maybe perhaps more philosophical, but also much kind of juicier and more interesting than the kind of standard topics. I feel like I could ramble on for ages about this, but I'm not sure I've answered your question.
No, you have, thank you. And we should talk more. Maybe Dennis has a view on this, but I just written a paper for iJade on spaces of possibility. And I would say personally online now, I was very inspired by Dennis's work when we were teaching together at Goldsmith. So I'll do that now, but thank you.
Okay, unfortunately, I think we could spend hours and hours talking about these issues. But we are now really running out of time, and I have to give the floor now to Martha for her final presentation, and also I can think kind of wrapping up. So Martha, sorry for being so late, but I'm sure that you can manage it. Your microphone is muted, Martha.
Okay. After all this talk about utopias, I feel that I'm a living example of that, starting with what Costas have said. I am not an educator, I'm an art historian, museum educator, and the past at least half and more of 1.5 decades, I am in the Faculty of Education as an academic, and I went there with a conscious personal choice because I thought that educating generalist teachers in art, this would be the basis of our sustainable future. So I'm very happy that we collated with Victoria and the CARE project, because this really gave us a step for interdisciplinary connections in real life issues of our students at the university and of teachers that are closely connected with us, and they are in total need of inspiration and of taking them into the field of real life, because art is in our real life, and all of us that are here now, we are very well in that field, so I don't need to say more on that. I was asked to give you a particular example of things that we are doing in the CARE project, and I am also having a class on that subject at the university. So I have made something that it might be quite familiar to you, but it's very important that we have been working on that for now a year. This is just one of the many such scenarios, which is not anymore a scenario. It's real practice for us. So what I will propose today for you or for art educators is something that we run, one of the projects. I call that with a short poem. It comes from a Greek trail, but you can understand that also in English the same way. So from the forest to the tree, from the tree to the paper, from the paper to earth, and again from the beginning. This hasn't got to do only with ecological literacy, as you will see, because we have combined inside the work that we are doing with the schools and the students, most of the big issues that we are discussing in the CARE project, and that comes with ecological literacy, compassion, the public space, connection, and making communities. So what we are trying to do is to make our learners sensitive to the visual and tactile and spatial world. The main issues that we plan in every kind of these scenarios is the conservation and change through traditional and cultural education, the public space, public behavior, ecological literacy, the compassion, which is something more general, and regeneration, because we don't only care for recycling. I am very much involved in emotional empathy and multicultural awareness myself and respect. So that's the two topics that I am really concerned when I'm teaching to my students. And I am very happy that all our schools and the university students as well were very keen in ecological activism through the project. We started with critical thinking, many discussions, group work. We are weaving each other's ideas and skills in an interdisciplinary learning, both in the school curricula and in the curricula at the university, trying to enable them to enhance their visual literature and experimental learning in order to have a holistic education. So I'm getting right to this scenario, which is not a scenario, as I've told you. Starting from the forest and getting on with all traditions, we start with the familiarity in the immediate, and then I get on with the wider cultural environment, practicing with their visual literacy. All the works that I'm going to show is just samples for all of you. You can use any kind of examples that line up with your culture or with your environment. In Greece, we usually in our lessons and our activism, we have a combination of the local and the international scene in all our lectures, so that our students are familiar with what's happening in other traditions. So that's what you are going to see in that proposal. I usually hold a ball of wool or a piece of wood for a relay race, and we try to unravel at the beginning through visual material, the myth of the trees. I'm sure you all know, of course you all know Asterix, you all know the story of the Druid and the ancient Greek myth of the Amadriades, the dryads, the girls that become trees in the morning and girls at night. So we start with that because we come up with the story of the tree, and what's the sacred tree? It's the oak tree, and then we saw the gold myrtle and the oak wreaths that we found in the ancient Macedonian tombs, and we're discussing why we are having wreaths. And this brings us to Alexandra Athanasiadi, one of the contemporary artists that took part in our project. Alexandra makes indirect references to the immense power of nature, as well as to the capacity of physical materials, tree trunks and driftwoods from the beaches, to be sustainably present in most creative and symbolic ways. She's trying to give breath and soul to old materials, and that's what we are trying to do when we are having our discussions with the symbolic image of the horse, made from driftwoods and is established in the stadium in the archaeological site of Olympia, where wreaths from olive trees are usually given to the athletes. And by going from the tree to the paper, we have a small reference to the Dreveni papyrus, an immense importance, not only for the study of the Greek religion and philosophy. It's the basis of the Western philosophical thought. It's the oldest Western papyrus that is in Europe and belongs to the documented heritage monuments in UNESCO. So we start with the papyrus, and we also have made a tailor-made video with the museum on how paper is routed from China, starting with the papyrus in Nile and then going to China, and how from the paper have routed through North Africa, going up to Spain and then to the whole of Europe. And we also have a detailed video on how to make our own paper with recycling other paper. And that's what we are trying at the school and the university, adding inside flowers, wood, fields, and other things. So in order to make our own manuscripts. And we also learn how we can do papier-mâché. You will see the reason for why. I won't show the video now to all of you. This is the second work from Alexandra Athanasiadis. It's a manuscript. It's also made on plywood, made of paper and cardboard, and aged. The papers that you see inside are manuscripts from the international known poet Constantin Cavafy, who wrote Ithaca, and they are aged with tea and coffee. We are teaching them how to make their own paper and how to age them. And by reading to them Halil Gibran, Constantin Cavafy, their own stories, we are asking them to make their own torsos. What you see down beneath are a very small sample of torsos that were made from students. These are with a Greek teacher, who I think she's connected now, Sophia, from that she was teaching last year in Portugal, and this is from a Greek teacher that she was teaching in Warsaw in Poland, and we have, of course, from our teachers and my students at the university. And this is a short video. I won't let it all because we don't have time. It's from the school from Kouloura in Veria, Greece. They have made a performance with the myth of the silent water, combining it with an old song from the trees. And at the end, the teachers are giving them manuscripts, which the students are placing inside their own thorax in order to protect their thoughts and everything that they have done. I won't leave it. You can see it all in our platform if you wish for. Care, in the program Care, we've made a platform which is open to everyone, and some of our projects are in there. By teaching them how to make their own paper, their own manuscripts, and also we are teaching them ancient Byzantine and Japanese techniques of binding their own books. We make also a reference to Yinkashoni Bare. I'm sure you are all familiar with this great installation, which is now in Tate. The same story that goes in his scenario of making all these paper stories books with the stories of people, first and second generation in Britain. We ask them to make their own book, their own manuscript, and not only make a torso, but make their story of their grandparents who might have come from Minor Asia or from other places from Greece, and keep songs and stories they can include inside. Bind them with a family traditional piece of cloth. My students have made perfect books like that, which I hold, and hopefully at the exhibition we're going to have in April, we will show some of them. To relax them, we decided to have the Jennifer Steinkamp, the dervish. I am sure you all know her work. It's a kind of music motor adaptation, integration. We really ask them to relax and move the same way that the trees are moving in order to get them back to nature. I'm sure you all know that. We connect it with seasons, we connect it with our energy, giving and getting back, and this drives us. I'm moving a little bit fast, I'm sorry, just because of the time limits. So by going to Jennifer's Steinkamp, we then take Marina Abramovich's method. You all know the iconic performance, and I'm sure you have seen, most of you at least, the Abramovich method with the complaint to the tree. These are the words that Marina is suggesting in order to bring people to hug a tree and say their complaint. I think that in the COVID period, we all felt that need. And the picture you have on the right-hand side is from the second kindergarten in Halkida. It's not the only example I have it also with my students at the university, that for the very few chances they had this year due to COVID to go outside, they were going to school, around their school, to the playground that they usually go, and they heard the voices from Marina Abramovich. They say songs and things that they wish to discuss with the trees, and they played with the trees. And that's what the teachers are commenting. And these are some of the actions we took on adopting and aesthetically caring for our trees. At the university, we've made a botanical garden around our school, and now we are having benches that we are weaving around them, different materials, getting ideas from Miro, from Kandinsky and others. Children that are using all the paintings, and they showing their work around the tree trunks. And I am sure, Ernst, you know the open library in Berlin down beneath from tree trunks, and this weaving around the trees, which is now being done around our university, is from Athens. This picture from one of our teachers that is in a group called the Yarn Group. And they are moving around in parks, and they are trying to not only aesthetically, but to show the connection and our feelings, our sustainable feelings to nature. We are talking about, of course, literature that discusses trees and sustainability. I am a tree, or now I am a paper, and of course Gianni Rodari, and illustrated by Silvia Bonanni. Sula Mitakidou, my beloved colleague and friend, has suggested that to me yesterday, which shows exactly how we need everything to go to a step further. So we need wood to have art, we need paper to do art. And at the last point, we take two examples from Costas Choklis, a contemporary Greek artist who had a step in his career quite late. He returned to tree trunks, and he discussed how planting a tree or working with a tree trunk made him think totally different what he was doing as an artist. The years that he was just using wood without thinking that it's part of nature. So by taking his own words that he has put it in his visual journal diary, one day he said, a small revelation became my new thought sensitivity guide. A tree whose ever-changing image had been saving my life broke and revealed to me its concrete and enduring truth, the wood, that had been hidden for so long under its ephemeral image. And I passionately loved this wonderful wound and found a two-way relationship between the object, matter, and nature. So what we are asking out of that is we start with creative writing, crossways, group work. We are having our own books, as I've told you, made with our own paper. So we go on illustrating them with any technique our students wishes to. They are all handmade. We, in order of solidarity and compassion, we make all our books in the university touch books for blind people. So, and for our students, because we have students that they don't see or they don't hear. So we need multimodal books at the Faculty of Education. We also have multimodal presentations with e-captions and illustrations that they can do them on the computer. And we hang our books on trees, like the ones that you see from the tree library, the image that you see with the school. And we are now going in the springtime to hang our own books at the botanical garden we've made at the farm, at the Faculty of Education. And of course, you all know The Giving Tree, a story that is giving us a lot of ideas. One of the last parts is to go outside and make photos of the ecological footprint of the trees we know, at the neighbors that we live. This is a photo of mine from a tree from my neighbor, and on the Goldsworthy, of course, the very famous land work. And the last works that we are working with is from Foveros Papagiannis, who has made a beautiful open sculpture park up in Epirus in Metsovo. And there he is using a lot of recycled materials. Among those are tree trunks and wood, driftwood, from burned old houses and historic places. So we are trying to get into the idea of making our own sculptures by reusing scrap wood and giving new forms and symbols. And at the end, but it's a very, very happy action for all of us, taking as examples Pavlos Yanisopoulos, an international Greek artist, Henri Matisse with his collet de papier, and origami, 3 techniques that they are using paper that we don't throw in the cabbage bin, but we are reusing and making things that we can use in our real life, or things that we love because they have all the aesthetics and all our personal artistic skills. We end up, and I think that they are all enjoying it, and at least the schools and our students are saying so. This was from me, thanking you all. I am happy to take any questions or hear your comments.
Thank you very
But
much.
I didn't take a lot of time. I tried to be
perfect. We have 5 minutes left.
okay.
Thank you very much, Martha. What I find now really striking is in the last 2 examples, we had this kind of interdisciplinary approach. Martha, you are coming from another field than from art education, and Harriet, you are coming from science. And I think if we really want to face these challenges we are facing at the moment in respect to sustainability, we really need you from other disciplines in order to further develop our field in respect to make them as an important game player in the future. And thank you both again also, and especially you, Martha, in bringing in this kind of what I would call a poetic thinking. You talked about this emotional connection that you are interested in, and I think these examples you used were so convincing in respect to this emotional overflow. For instance, to me, I can only speak about me, and I discovered this kind of poetic thinking that is really so important, especially in art education. And also very convincing, the combination between professional artworks and your pedagogical thoughts. So thank you very much for this. We were right to put you in the end because it was really a kind of conclusion. But I don't want to hinder any questions.
It's also amazing that we have 2 of the participants of the.
We have five. Even
we have 5.
Also, the school with a performance.
I think they should open the cameras at least just to say hi. I mean,
yes, and I would like to thank them. It's only a very small sample of a lot of work that is going on in many schools in Greece, and I'm happy for that. And I also have some of my university students that I are in, and I'm very glad. They are really engaged, and to be honest, when I started, I was at the Department of Art History, of course, and when I decided to go to the Faculty of Education, I was really very happy to see that they are more engaged in art. They might not know so many things, and this, I agree totally with Costas that it's a matter of very bad politics and very bad curricula, not only in Greece, everywhere, and we are discussing that in the CARE project. But it's really amazing how they adapt when you give them the chance. And I'm very glad that I have that field now, and that step to talk to people that they will use them with the children in school. Maybe they will be their future citizens to discuss sustainability issues more seriously than we have done.
Yeah, a warm welcome to them.
Welcome. I don't know if Sophia wants to say something, or the other partners, the other participants who implemented things, how they are thinking about their reflections.
Hello to everyone, I'm Sophia. I was glad to be participant of this amazing experience because I was used to be a student of Martha Ioannidou. And when I was in Portugal doing my
Now you're frozen. I heard it is very cold in Greece. So that's why you are frozen.
It is.
And when I was in a foreign country, so for me it was a challenge to do this in practice with students that I didn't know their language. And the result was amazing because you don't need language like to connect with people, but art could be miracles. And thank you for this. And how to connect academic studies with real life, for me, it's so important. Because all of us, we are citizens of the world, of our countries, and we need to be united to make utopias in real life. Thank you all.
Thank you. Any more questions in respect to this wonderful final presentation? Marie?
Yeah, so it's a more general question to all of the presentators. Thank you again. So are there already publications on this? Because so I'm asking because I'm writing my PhD thesis on art education and climate crisis. And yeah, it would be super interesting to have a closer look at the project.
There are not yet. Just send me an email and I connect you to okay. Some people. And
right, thank you.
We also have okay.
In the coming few months, there will be on the website some publications because the project is coming to an end and everything will be online.
Okay, yeah, so then thank you.
You're welcome. Very good. So thank you everybody for your wonderful presentations, your wonderful questions, comments, and so on. I give the hand over to Patsy. Patsy wanted to ask you to switch on your cameras because you want to make a group photo.
And I say thank you very much, everybody. I came here today for my own personal benefit, not as the secretary of InSEA. And I really enjoyed because I'm doing some of the work like this with my students. So thank you very much for the international dimension, which InSEA is all about. And I just want to say, I know that we have people here. I know we have Bronwyn from Australia, and I know that we have other InSEA members. So thank you for coming. For those of you who are not members of InSEA, please check out our new website. For those of you who are students, we have a very good student discount. And the webinar and all of the other webinars, the fantastic webinars that have been done so far by the European Regional Council and the other councils in InSEA are on the InSEA website for InSEA members only. And I see that we have Celia, our treasurer, and we also had Teresa, our vice president. So this is a very, really good group. So can I ask everybody, please, just to put on your cameras, if you would like, for 1 minute, and give a big wave to our friends in different countries around the world, please. I'll just give 1 minute. Some people are very shy, but anyway. Okay, I'm going to take a photo. If everybody gives a big wave, thank you very much. And another big smile. Thank you, everybody. And just to let you know, to keep up to date with all of the details, you'll find them. We have a new website, and there is a link to the European Regional Council on the website. And I will be sending out a newsletter to European members very shortly on behalf of the great work that Ernst, Andy, and Maria do. Okay, thank you, Ernst. I had to go and get out of my pajamas now to do this. Thanks very much. I asked Ernst to do it and he said he would forget. So I wanted to stay behind the radar. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Patsy. Thank you, all the presenters.
Thank you, Ernst.
All the contributors.
And Maria.
Thank you.
And thanks, Maria, for organizing all of this in a wonderful way. So have a nice day, have a nice weekend, and bye-bye.
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 Bye.